Hi everyone. Get comfortable and maybe pour yourself a fresh cup of coffee or tea, because the story I'm about to tell is a bit of an emotional roller coaster. It's one of those hidden family truths that starts with a whisper and ends up changing the entire landscape of your life. But before I really get into what happened that night, please take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It honestly helps this community grow more than you realize. And if you're the kind of person who loves stories about how messy and beautiful real life can be, I want you here for every single upload. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from today. Are you in a quiet countryside town where the wind howls through the trees? Or are you watching from a high-rise in a city that never stops moving? I love reading about where you all are. My name is Chloe. When this whole situation began, I was in my early 20s trying to navigate the chaotic bridge between being a girl and becoming a woman. I've always been a bit intense, fiery red hair, and a personality to match, full of anxiety and big dreams. My life started a bit rough. My father left the picture before I could even walk, so it was always just me and my mom, Sarah. She was a nurse who worked impossible hours, yet somehow always made me feel like the center of her universe. We were a fortress of two. Then, the year I turned 19, the fortress opened its gates. Mom met Robert. He was a calm, steady architect who designed quiet spaces for a living. He had a son named Julian from his first marriage. They fell in love with a speed that made my head spin, and 6 months later, they were married. Suddenly, we were blending our lives into a sprawling, modern house tucked away in the Colorado foothills. At first, it was strained. Julian was 2 years younger than me, but he carried himself with a quiet maturity I found intimidating. He had dark, messy hair and eyes the color of slate, always looking like he was deep in thought. While I was a graphic design student constantly stressing over deadlines and spilled coffee, he was a landscape photographer, spending his days hiking ridges and chasing the perfect lighting. We were opposites. I was clutter and noise. He was open space and silence. Mom and Robert were blissfully happy, hosting dinner parties and trying to force a sibling dynamic on us. But Julian and I were just polite strangers passing in the kitchen. We'd exchange a nod or a mumbled "hey" while grabbing water, but that was the extent of it. But, living under the same roof has a way of eroding walls. As the months rolled by, things shifted in subtle ways. I'd notice he fixed the leaky faucet in my bathroom without saying a word. Or he'd notice I was stressed and leave a specific herbal tea on the counter for me. I started to see the man behind the camera lens. I saw how patient he was, how he viewed the world with a kind of quiet wonder that I envied. By the time I was 23 and he was 21, we had found a rhythm. I was freelancing from home, and he was editing his portfolio in the den. We started hanging out when our parents went on weekend trips. We'd order massive amounts of sushi and critique old black and white movies, debating the cinematography until 2 a.m. Mom and Robert were over the moon, constantly saying how relieved they were that we were finally acting like family. But for me, the word family felt wrong. Because when I looked at Julian, I didn't feel sisterly. I felt a magnetic pull. I caught myself watching his hands when he worked, or the way he half smiled when I made a bad joke. I dated a few guys, and he had his own life, but my compass always pointed back to him. Then came the Friday night that changed the trajectory of everything. I had gone to a gallery opening in the city with some art school friends. The wine was flowing, the music was hypnotic, and I was trying to drown out my own confusion. But as the night wrapped up and everyone went home with their partners, that ache of loneliness hit me hard. I took a rideshare home around 1:30 in the morning. The house was pitch black, nestled against the snowy trees, except for the soft glow of a monitor coming from the den where Julian worked. My parents were asleep in the master wing. I slipped off my boots and walked down the hallway in my socks. I should have gone to bed. But the wine had made me brave, and the silence of the house felt too big to handle alone. I stopped at the open door of the den. Julian was there editing photos surrounded by prints. When he looked up and saw me, hair windblown, cheeks flushed from the cold and the wine, he didn't look away. "You're back late," he said, his voice low and raspy. I leaned against the doorframe. It was a long night, I whispered. And now I'm here, and I don't want to be by myself. He paused, his eyes scanning my face. Reading the subtext, I was terrified to speak out loud. He swiveled his chair around. Come in, then. I walked in and sat on the old leather sofa he kept in there. The room was warm, smelling of pine and old paper. We started talking about the art show, about his photos, but the conversation was just a cover. The air between us was electric. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I don't think I can go to my room tonight, I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. I want to be near you. Julian went completely still. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the same hunger in his eyes that I had been hiding. Chloe, he said softly, if you stay, we can't pretend this is just friendly. I moved from the sofa to where he was sitting. I'm done pretending, I said. I reached out, touching his shoulder, and that was the spark that lit the fire. He stood up and we didn't say another word. The distance closed, and suddenly we were holding on to each other, like we were the only two people on Earth. It wasn't just physical, it was an outpouring of 3 years of unspoken tension and deep, confusing affection. We fell asleep on that leather sofa, tangled together under a throw blanket, hiding from the world. But dawn always comes, and with it, reality. I woke up before him, panic and elation warring in my chest. I crept back to my room before the sun fully rose, but the dynamic of the house was shattered. When I walked into the kitchen later for breakfast, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mothers know. I don't know how, but Mom took one look at my face, and then at Julian's inability to look at Robert, and she knew. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was heavy. A few days later, Robert found us talking in the driveway, standing too close, voices too intimate. He asked what was going on. We didn't lie. The next few months were the hardest of my life. Mom was heartbroken, feeling like the stability she built was crumbling. Robert was furious and hurt, retreating into a shell of silence. Dinners were canceled. Doors were kept shut. Julian moved into a studio apartment in the city to give everyone space, and I stayed behind, walking through a house that felt like a museum of regrets. We went to therapy, all of us. It was grueling. There were tears, accusations, and long, heavy pauses. Mom talked about her fear of judgment. Robert talked about his confusion. But Julian and I sat there, holding hands, explaining that this wasn't a rebellion. It was a connection that had grown slowly, organically, and deeply. We didn't break up. We couldn't. We met for hikes on neutral ground. We got coffee in towns where nobody knew us. We knew that what we found that night was worth the fire we were walking through. The breakthrough happened on a rainy afternoon. Mom found me packing a bag, planning to leave to stop being a source of tension. She sat on the edge of my bed and just held me, the way she did when I was a little girl. She told me that she was scared, but she loved me more than she cared about what the neighbors might think. I see the way he looks at you, she whispered. It's real, and I can't fight real. Robert took longer. He's a man of structure, and we had broken the blueprint. But eventually, he invited Julian over for a barbecue. It was stiff and awkward, but it was a bridge. Time is the best healer. Slowly, we built a new reality. Julian and I eventually got a place together downtown. We stopped hiding. We started showing up to family events as a couple. It took courage, and it took a lot of uncomfortable conversations. Today, looking back at that snowy night, I don't see a mistake. I see the moment I finally chose my own happiness over everyone else's expectations. My relationship with my mom is stronger now because it's built on total honesty. And Robert and Julian have found their own way back to being father and son, and maybe something like friends. I wanted to share this because I know how heavy secrets can feel. But I also know that sometimes you have to break the mold to find where you truly fit. We had to dismantle our family to rebuild it into something stronger and more honest. If you're walking a path that others don't understand, or if you're holding back feelings because you're afraid of the fallout, just know that truth, as scary as it is the only path to freedom. Thank you so much for listening, and for letting me share this piece of my heart with you. If this story resonated with you, Or if you've ever had to fight for love in a difficult situation, please remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. It means the world to me. Your story is yours to write, no matter how many plot twists it takes to get there. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.